So I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker, Professor Chang-Ock. Chang-Ock received his PhD degree in mathematics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1995. From 1995 to 2000, he was an assistant professor in the Department of Mathematics, Inha University, Korea. In 2000, he joined the Division of Applied Mathematics, Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST, Korea, and currently holds the position of Professor of Mathematics in the Department of Mathematical Sciences at KAIST. His research interests include image processing based on PDEs, medical imaging, and effective numerical solvers in parallel environment. He will serve as the president of Korean Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, KSIAM, for the term 2021 to 2022. Chang-Ock's talk today, the title is Artifact Suppression in X-ray CT Images. Chang-Ock, yeah.
Okay, thanks to the organizer for the invitation to this nice seminar series. Okay, yeah, this is the talk, okay, for the artifact suppression X-ray CT images, and this is work with my former PhD students, Su-Min. Okay, this is the content of my talk. I will introduce the X-ray CT imaging, and then I will introduce image artifacts due to beam hardening and scattering. Then I will introduce some previous metal artifact reduction algorithms and our proposed algorithms. Then I will introduce, I will extend that algorithm to the three-dimensional industry Conbeam CD. And then finally, I will give the explain about the scattering artifact and also scattering artifact reduction method. Okay, what is X-ray CT? Yeah, I assume that everybody knows the X-ray CT very well. Okay, so there's X-ray CT is one of the most widely used tomographic imaging technique in the world, and we use X-ray beam which passes through the body at different angles. So we rotate, okay? We rotate the body or we rotate the scanner. So we have a bunch of slice images, okay? And we reconstruct the internal images. So we can visualize the internal structure of the object. Okay, it's a really inverse problems because in every object has materials inside, and that materials has the attenuation coefficients. So we have instant X-ray beam. So the instant X-ray beam goes to the object, and in that object we have the attenuation coefficients. Then the X-ray beam will be absorbed here, and then that remaining X-ray beam arrives at the detector. So we measure the remaining X-ray intensity here, and so we recover this f of x, so that is attenuation coefficient from a series of X-ray data. So that's really inverse problems. Okay, so I will say about the basic principles of CT. So this is the Chevron phantom, and here this X-ray beam penetrates this Chevron phantom. So it's we assume that parallel beam. Okay, so the remaining one arrives here. Okay, so we consider the Lardon transform. Lardon transform is just the summation of the attenuation coefficient. Okay, so the remaining one is described as the Beer-Lambertero. So the remaining intensity is the remaining intensity decays okay, exponential decay from the initial intensity. Okay, that's Pierre Lambertero. And if you look at these pictures, so the one remaining intensity is stacked here. So as you rotate the scanner, you get a bunch of the series of the remaining data, and we stack that, and this is called sinogram data. Okay, and actually that that attenuation coefficient is depending on energy level E. So in this case, we just consider single energy level. Okay, in practice, X-ray has a multiple energy level. So the measured attenuation intensity I zeta is given by that. So this intensity is depending on E, and we integrate all intensities, okay, all intensities in terms of energy levels. And that is expressed as these rows. And we take this I zeta and divided by initial intensity and take minus logarithm. So this is called the multiple energy data, and we call it as the sinogram data. So in actual X-ray CT scanner, the sinogram data shows this quantity. Okay, so we have the radon inverse transform. So if f is Aron functions, and also f belongs to domain of radon transform, and with f hat, the Fourier transform is Aron functions, then for these unit vectors, we have the radon inverse form. So this is radon transform and the Fourier transform in terms of a space variable, and then we put the high pass filter. Then we take the inverse Fourier transform, and we take that along the all zeta. Okay, that's very famous, the radon inverse form. But in practice, we don't have this R zeta have. Instead of this radon transform, we have this P zeta. P zeta comes from the multiple energy levels. So we just replace that R zeta by this P zeta and use this use this inversion form. Okay, so we have a sinogram which is produced by the multiple energy X-ray beam, and when we take the inversion of that, we just assume that, okay, this is just the radon inversion. So we just assume that this is generated by single energy. Okay, so we have this image. So this is actual, okay, this is the sinogram Chevron phantom, and we have multiple energy. So we have this sinogram data, and we have radon inversion here. So we have this CT images. And if you think this P is not the inverse of, the R is not the inverse of P, so in actual case, this and these are not equal. But in reality, it's very similar. But in reality, we just see the contrast image. So that's enough. Okay, so now let's talk about the various artifacts in CT images. There are several artifacts in CT images. So the beam hardening and the scattering artifact, partial volume effect, photon starvation, and undersampling. And in this talk, I'll focus on this beam hardening and the scattering artifact. Okay, so if you look at this dental image, you can see strong streak artifact. So that actually the many people has the metals in teeth. So this metal causes a strong beam hardening artifact, which is called metal artifact. And this is also show that the scattering artifact. So many of the industrial products shows scattering artifacts, and it shows some blurred images. Okay, so mathematically, the definition of artifact is systematic discrepancies between reconstructed CT image and the true attenuation coefficients of the object. So the noise is also regarded as the artifact, but we don't regard the noise. Okay. So there are so many causes, so many categories in the artifact. So the usually we have categories in terms of cause and shape. So in terms of cause, we consider the physics-based artifact, the patient-based artifact. The patient-based artifact means the motion artifact of a patient, and the scanner-based. Scanner always the instrumental, the noise, and others. And in terms of shape, we have streak artifact. So if you see this image, this dental image, you can see strong streak artifact. So that's called the streak artifact. And the ring artifact usually detector has some defect. Then in the CT image, you can see some ring shape artifact. And also cupping artifact. Cupping artifact comes from the scattering artifact. And if you see this image, actually this metal artifact causes the strong streak artifact. And if you have a stack of these images and using those, if you reconstruct the three-dimensional image, you can see this kind of a needle which stems from these teeth. Okay, so the removal of these streak artifact caused by metal is very important. Okay, so the metal artifact is one of the most representative beam hardening artifact, and it is due to the strong nonlinear effect of metal. So look at these pictures. Okay, so this is the attenuation coefficient in terms of the energy. Okay, so if you use a single energy, then for each material, that the attenuation coefficients are fixed. But if you use multiple energies, then the attenuation coefficient changes in terms of the energy. So the difference between this multiple energy projection data, so the sinogram, and just the single energy radon transform is approximate this formula. And if you look at this term, this radon transform of derivative of this attenuation coefficient in terms of energy, and so if there is no changes of attenuation coefficient in terms of energy, it becomes zeros. So there is no difference between multiple energy projected data and radon transform, but it has a strong changes. Okay, that strong changes in terms of energy, then this become big, and even sometimes it has the jump. Okay, so in this case, projected data, multiple energy projected data, and the radon transform has big errors. Okay, so there are so many algorithms, not so many, just either algorithms to reduce metal artifact. So this is just the Shell-Logan phantom, and put the metal here, and this causes that strong streak artifact. And if you consider sinogram data, that part is affected by that metal. And the one very simple thing is interpolate the data using the above and the below, or the in-painting these regions. So you can see these nice images, but just by interpolating this data or in-painting this data, you can generate that the sinogram data which is not in the sinogram space. So if you take inversion of this sinogram data, you can have this kind of CT images. So you see, okay, you see the artifact still remains here. Okay. So another thing is, instead of taking interpolation or in-painting, you just get some best matched patch from this sinogram. So just to take best matched patch from this cyanogram, we can get also very nice images. But if you do the radon inversions, then we have still, okay, you can see still the artifact remains. Okay. And another approach which is done by Jinggen Se is mathematically characterize the metal artifacts in X-ray CT. So they computed that this artifact mathematically and subtract it from that the data. Okay, so then they get this image, but this is mathematically constructed artifact. So that is, in a sense, approximation to the real artifact. So you can see still the artifact remains here. Most popular method in metal artifact reduction is NMAR. NMAR is called normalized metal artifact reduction. This is kind of interpolation method, but it has some techniques of normalizations, and this is most famous method and the most popular method in the metal artifact reduction world. So, but it still shows some artifact here. Okay, so now I want to introduce our method, which is called the cyanogram surgery. Okay, so the idea is like that. Here, this is a cyanogram data, and this white region is affected by metals. And if you take radon inverse transform, then you get this image. So you have very strong metals here, and between that metals, you can see this strong streak artifact. And if you see this, then okay, the region which is far away from this streak artifact, we can trust these regions. Okay, the CT values here we can trust here, and also in the cyanograms, this white region is affected by metals, but this black region is not affected by metals. So we can trust the value in cyanogram. So we use the values in trusted region, okay, alternatively, and we correct that white regions affected by metals, and we correct that regions which is occupied by metals. Okay, so this is a very simple idea. So we have cyanogram data, and we construct the CT data by taking radon inversion, and using the thresholding, we extract metals. Okay, so since we know the regions of metals, we take some regions around that metals. So we take some averages of intensity values of surrounding that metals, and we fill in that metal regions using the averaged values. So we call that as average fill-in process. Okay, and if you take a projected data from that extractions, you can see the regions which is affected by this metal very clearly. Okay, then from this corrected CT data, you take the cyanogram data. Then here you can trust the cyanogram data here, and you cannot trust the data in white regions. So since we know that the regions which is affected by metal exactly, we take the cyanogram of that regions from this cyanogram. So we put that data here. So we call that is a surgery. So with that surgery, now we reconstruct the data, the CT data, and we do repeat the same process. So surrounding metals, we get average feeding process again and generate a new cyanogram and again take a surgery. Okay, so we repeat this process. Okay. Actually, we published the paper 2 years ago, and we had some mathematical proof for the convergence of that algorithms in very restricted situations. So this metal is shape of metal is similar to circular, then we can prove that convergence. Okay, so now I show that some simulated phantom results. So this is a simulated phantom. Also, this is another Shem-Logan phantom. Also, this is Shem-Logan phantom. So here we have 3 metals. Here we have 3 metals, but here we have 2 big metals. And we used the 7 discretized energy beams from the list. Okay, so in terms of energy levels, many the materials shows a different kind of numbers here. Okay, so using that, this is uncorrected image. Okay, uncorrected image, and this is original metal-free images, and this is the M-model method, and this shows the our method. And if you magnify these rectangular regions, then you see this picture and you see these pictures. And if you look at this, okay, this M-model method still shows some artifacts around here, but our method, okay, shows very clear images. And another phantoms, okay, this is Shem-Logan phantoms, and which contains that 3 metals. And if you see these two, between these 2 metals, there is some materials here. And this is metal-free, okay, metal-free images, and you can clearly see some materials between these 2 metals. So M-model method shows this. So if you magnify this one, this, if you magnify this small rectangles, this shows that. In our case, okay, our case shows very clear images. Okay, so the M-model method is just the normalized interpolation method, and we can see that the cyanogram is exactly not in the cyanogram space. But in our case, we repeated the process, the feeding process, average feeding, and the cyanogram surgery process. We have the convergence results. Okay, so that means our result is very close to the something which is in cyanogram space. Okay, now we have a very big 2 metals here, and this is uncorrected image, and it's very hard to see some materials between these 2. Okay, but in our cases, it clearly shows there is some materials between these 2 big metals. And now we have a patient data. So far we did it for the simulated data, and we obtained X-ray CT data, so real patient data from the Seoul National University Hospital. And it's very hard to get the CT data which contains a metal object in whole body. That's not possible at all. So so we put the metal object in CT image. So that's kind of a fake, but it's accepted in the world. So this is pelvis, this is chest, this is dental image, and this is a plate where the man is lying, and you can see arms. Okay, so the pelvis, chest, and the dental. Okay, so we put the strong metal here, then it generates strong streak artifact. And M-model shows this result, and our method shows this result. So this is much better. And for this chest images also, we put the metal here, and the MR shows this one, and our method shows this one. Okay, and also dental data. Okay, dental data. Yeah, this is the MR result, and this is our result. And if you magnify these rectangles, then you can see still the strong streak artifact in the MR case, and we can see very clear images in our method. So for the success of our method, we had two steps. One is average feeding, and one is another is sinogram surgery. And for the average feeding, we need to identify the regions which surrounds the metal regions. Okay, that's a key factor in this method. Okay, now let's see X-ray CT X-ray CT in the industry field. Yeah, so nowadays the role of X-ray CT has been increased, and we have various applications. So flow detections, inspections, and the security check in the airport also. Okay, so in this case, we use 3-dimensional cone beam CT. So this in the 3-dimensional cone beam CT, then we have also cone beam CT artifact also. But here we don't handle that cone beam CT artifact. Okay, our proposed algorithm is just the extension of our 2-dimensional algorithms to 3-dimensional cone beam CT. And in industrial case, industrial field, the industrial product has CAD data. Okay, so we use CAD data as a shape prior, because I already told you that in the average peeling process, we need to identify the regions which surrounds the metal regions. But in 2-dimensional case, that's okay. But in 3-dimensional case, it's very hard to identify which volume contains that flow or metals there. So we use CAD data to identify that. So we had the CAD data, we had the CT data, and we register that CAD data to that CT data using the shape prior segmentation process. And then we extract the flow or metals and the average feeding, sinogram surgery. We repeat this process, okay? And then finally we get the CT image reconstruction. So the basic algorithms are the same, but in 3-dimensional case, we use CAD data to get this shape prior segmentation process. Okay, so this is the CT data. And if you look at this CT data, you see some artifact which is top of that product. Okay, so that is coming from cone beam CT. So that is a kind of cone beam CT artifact. And this is CAD data, and it looks very clean images. So we make the binary data from this CAD data, and we have a CT data from the CT machines. So the CAD data shows some shape prior information. So we need to match this CAD data to that CT data. So in order to do that, we consider the inertial tensor matrix of 3D volumes. So we have this 3x3 matrix, and from this 3x3 matrix, you can find the major axis of this object, and also finding eigenvalues. We can find the size of that product. Okay, so we do the same process. We find the inertial tensor of the CAD data, and also we find the inertial tensor of that CT data. Okay, then we have two major axes. Okay, one is for the CT data, and another is for the CAD data. So if you transform that major axis, okay, we can match that the CT data, CAD data to the CT data, and also since we know that eigenvalues, we can get the scaling factors. Okay, so using that, we have that we have a CT. Yeah, we we matched the CAD data to the CT data, but that is not exactly matched because the CT data contains noise and cone beam artifact. Okay, so now in order to register that CAD data to CT data, we consider this kind of minimization functional. This is very famous Chang-Ock models, but a little bit different one is PSI. PSI comes from this shape prior. Okay, that shape prior is level set functions from the CAD data, and we have PSI is just the translation of three-dimensional rotations of the shape prior. So using that, we minimize this functional for the CT data. Okay, and in order to have this minimization process, instead of the very standard gradient descent method, we use the PSO algorithms. PSO is particle swarm optimization algorithms. It's very easy to implement. And also we consider two resolution approaches. It's a three-dimensional calculation, so it takes a lot of cost. So we reduce the resolutions of CD data and the CAD data and find first the rotation, translation factor and the rotation factors. And then we take full resolutions using that previously found that the angles and the translations as initials. Okay, so this is the CD data, this is the CAD data, and we have transformations and the scaling and the registrations. We have this registered CAD data. Okay, now, okay, we designed real patterns. Okay, this is aluminum body and the 3 leader points. Okay, so and we took the X-ray CD. So now this is the result from that our designed the product. So this is given CD, and we have given CAD data, and this is aligned one, and by registration process we have this one. Okay, so if you compare this and this, then you can see, okay, it should be rotated more to match this. So in the registration process, this is rotated a little bit more, and now this is matched to that. Okay, so this is registered to that CD data. Okay, so now it's a kind of artificial simulations. Actually, we put the air bubble CD data, okay, 3-dimensional volumes. Actually, it's very hard to include the air bubble intentionally. So here in this case, we put the air bubble in the CT images, and also put the here that metals, and it shows a very strong artifact, and we cannot see anything here. And this is CAD data, and using the CAD data informations, we take the feeding process and sinogram surgery process, and we get this result. Then you can see here that you just compare these CAD volumes and there's corrected results. Okay, then you can see here the air bubble. Okay. Now, let's move to the scattering artifact. Okay, if X-ray beam is going to the some product, there is 3 cases. One penetrates, okay, one is absorbed totally, okay, and another thing is the signal is scattered. And in this case, if signal is scattered, we get the scattering artifact. So there is 2 sources of scattering artifact. One is a Rayleigh effect, and another is a Compton effect. Here I don't want to explain what is a Rayleigh effect and what is a Compton effect, but okay, you should remember we have 2 major effects to cause scattering. So this is the scattering artifact in the industrial product, and this is scattering artifact in the medical data. Okay, so there are many scattering suppression methods. Okay, one is rejection method based on hardware. So when you take the X-ray, when you use the X-ray scanner, just to put some hardware to reject that scattering. And another thing is the scattering correction method based on software. So one is just estimation of scatterings by Monte Carlo method. And another thing is the kernel-based method, and we say there is a compensation method. And also there is a hybrid method, okay, using Monte Carlo and the kernel-based method. Okay, let me explain a little bit about the Monte Carlo scatter corrections. Okay, this is uncorrected images, and in this Monte Carlo scatter method, it requires a mask. So there is a two way to get the mask. One is image-based mask. So just looking at this uncorrected method, and we take some mask by a segmentation process. And in this case, using this mask, if we do the Monte Carlo scattering corrections, then this is a corrected one, and there is a difference, okay, between the uncorrected image and the corrected image. And if you do the prior-based, if you get the prior-based mask, so for example, for example, industrial product has the CAD data. So using the CAD data, we have a very nice mask. And in this case, if you do Monte Carlo scatter corrections, then we get these corrected results, and the difference is so small. Okay. Let me say about the kernel-based scatter corrections now. Okay, this is this is a scatter signal, and this is a primary signal. Okay, so without the scattering, this primary signal is just the sinogram data. Okay, it produces sinogram data. Here, AF is, we call this as a scatter source. So AF is the magnitude and also primary data divided by this initial data, and this is reverse of that, and we take logarithms. Actually, this is called the sinogram. Okay, if you remember the slices in first stage. Okay, so here we have the A is magnitude, alpha, another parameter, beta is also parameter, and the HS is now we call scatter propagation kernels. So it has two Gaussian kernels, and one is from Compton effect, one is from Rayleigh effect, but we don't know which one is which. Okay, we just put the two Gaussian distributions here and take convolutions. Okay, so okay, this is measured signal. Measured signal is a primary signal plus scattered signal, and if you estimate this scattered signal, then subtracting the scattered signal from the measured data, we can get the primary signal. Okay, so it doesn't have the primary signal, doesn't have scattering artifact. Also, recently there is a convolutional neural network scatter corrections. So we have the scattered data. We have data which contains a scattering artifact, and this is scatter estimations. And instead of this mathematical formula, they use a convolutional neural network. But in this case, it requires a lot of labeled data, and the labeled data were made by Monte Carlo simulations. Okay, so if you have Monte Carlo simulations to get to train the network, okay, it also requires a lot of cost to make the labeled data. Okay, now let's see scattering kernel again. So this is magnitude, and this is another parameters. Also, this is parameters, and the sigma 2 is the also parameters. B is another magnitude. So in this case, we have 6 parameters. Okay, so we have the variable x contains 6 parameters, and now we minimize this function I minus price measured signal minus primary signal plus the scattered signal. But in this case, actually, we don't know the primary signal. Okay, so if you know the primary signal, we can minimize this functional easily, but we don't know this primary signal. So here in the industry field, we know that the CAD data is available. Okay, so in Monte Carlo method, we also use the CAD data, and in the metal artifact reduction, we also use the CAD data for the industrial product. So here also we use a CAD data, and we generate approximate primary signal. So this is scattered contaminated raw data, and this is shape prior from the CAD data, and using that we can have a primary signal. So this is not exactly primary signal, but we consider this is as the approximated primary signal. Okay, so from the CAD data, we have a primary signal, and we use that here, and we minimize this one. And this has actually 6-dimensional minimization problems, and we tried several times, but we couldn't succeed to get the very nice results. But suddenly we found that if we do the 2-step method, then it works very well. So first we estimate these kernels, A, alpha, beta, sigma 1. So ignoring B and sigma 2. That means here we ignore this part. So we estimate this scattered kernels. So we estimate the major scattered kernels. We don't know that comes from that comes from Compton effect or Rayleigh effect. We don't know, but we just estimate the major effect. So we estimate that using this 4-dimensional space, and after finding that, use that as initials, and we estimate the whole kernels. So it's a 2-step method, and we found that the scattered kernels, and we subtracted from the measured data, and we get the primary data. Okay, so now this is simulated phantom result. Okay, this is the ground truth, and this is contaminated, and this is the corrected one. Okay, so if you look at the graph, this green shows that the ground truth, and the ground truth is here. Okay, here, and the red shows contaminated. So this is a cupping effect. Okay, and this is yellow shows the corrected is very, very similar to the ground truth. And actually, if you look at the values, okay, this first line is our estimated values, and the second line is the parameters we used for generating this contaminated data. So if you look at the data, it's very, very, very close. Okay, and this is another phantoms, and this is contaminated phantoms, and this is corrected result. Also, it shows very nice results. So this red line shows that this is the contaminated. Okay, so the scattering artifact, and we recovered the very nice data, which is close to the real data. And if you look at the parameters shows that it is very we obtained a very correct result here. Okay, now we do the real experimental data. Since this is real experimental data case, we don't have a reference image, and this is a contaminated data, and this is corrected data, and we see these diagonal profiles. Okay, if you look at diagonal profiles, that this blue shows that this is scattered image, and the red shows the corrected image. And we believe that from the previous simulated result, okay, we believe that in this case we found correct the data. Okay. Now, this I use time. Okay. Yeah, the 45 minutes. Okay. So my conclusion is we had a review on the artifact in CT image, and we proposed an algorithm to reduce the metal artifact in 2D CT images, and we extended it to the 3-dimensional cone-beam case, but we used the CAD data as the prior information, and we proposed the scattering artifact reduction algorithms using the minimization functional, and actually, as far as I know, this is the first algorithm to give the exact parameters in the scatter kernel estimation case. And our proposed algorithm suppressed the artifact in CT images successfully. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Chang-Ock, for this very interesting talk. Now is a question and answer sessions. If any participant want to ask question, you can either write it in the chat box and then I will read it out for you, or you can use the raise hand button and then I will unmute you and then you can ask the question. Okay, so now we have a question from Brenda Lynch. So he asked, is it necessary or beneficial to be able to distinguish scattering from Reddy versus Compton effects? It would seem in the decontamination methods you described, it isn't needed to distinguish.
Actually, okay. Just from the physics, we know that the scattering effect comes from Compton effect and Rayleigh effect, and we don't know how to separate the Compton effect and the Rayleigh effect. So I don't know. So if you separate that the Compton effect or remove the Compton effect, it may be helpful, or I don't know.
Okay. So in fact, I would like to ask, so from the, well, I don't know this scattering effect, so, but from your numerical result, it seems that it affects the whole image, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but there will not be case where it only affects a part of the image, right?
No.
Oh, no. Okay, I see. Okay. Yeah. Another question I would like.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead. Is that okay? So another question I would like to ask is that, so in the first MAR algorithm, so it seems to me that when you explain the algorithm, there is nothing in between the this metal, right? So and then you try to kind of approximate whatever in between the metal by something outside. Is that correct? So that basically that's the idea, right?
Yeah, that's the idea, but I don't approximate it. Actually, the before metal is there. Okay, before metal is okay in. We assume that the metal region is actually the in the homogeneous regions. So the metal region is the same as the surroundings. Okay, so that's our basic assumption.
But then in one of the example, I see something in between the metal. So then I wonder how can you approximate them? So maybe you go back. I forget the page. Maybe I think the second last example before the tooth example. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you go back? Yeah. So I think. Oh, no.
Here.
No. So in the numerical example, okay.
Numerical examples. Okay.
Yeah. Here, so yes, actually now you see that so between the two metals there are 3 dots, right? So but then you can also you can reconstruct them. So I wonder how you can do that. Yeah. So why you can reconstruct that? Because they are hidden by the artifact.
Okay. Actually, if you do the peeling process, then that means we fill these metal regions surrounding values using surrounding values, and we don't touch the CT values here, and this is reconstructed from the original sinograms.
Oh, okay. So in the sinogram, they are not there. So they are not in between, probably. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I see.
So sinogram contains that information, and that information is not corrupted by the metals in sinograms.
I see. Okay, so that's why. Okay.
And let me mention about the metal artifact reduction and the scattering reduction a little bit. Actually, the metal artifact is kind of a local artifact, okay? But the scattering artifact is a global artifact. So the scattering happens in whole images. So usually the scattering is much more harder problems. Okay.
Yeah. So are there any other questions? I don't see any question from the Q&A, from the raise hand button, right? So I hope I didn't miss anyone. Are there any other questions? No, I don't see any other questions. No. Okay. If there are no further questions, then I think we will end today. Thank you for thank you, Chang-Ock, for this very interesting and exciting talk. Okay. And,
thank you very much.
Yeah. And I would like to remind our participants that next week there may be some places that are ending the summertime, but the US, they still keep the summertime for, well, maybe 1 or 2 more weeks. So then, so you better check the exact time for our next week seminar in case your country or your region change the times soon. Okay. So I hope that we can see you next week. Thank you for attending this week's talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation again. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.